Good morning. How you holding up? How's everything going? Are you getting stir crazy yet? Are you ready to be turned out? Well, and it looks like we're kind of headed in that direction. As you well know, our governor has started to open things up some, and I wanted to address that just a little bit before we get into today's lesson. Um, some of these ideas about getting back together, and a little context here. I know um, probably most all of us are very, very anxious to see these restrictions lifted and to come and go as we can, while maintaining safety and things like that. I want you to know it's a pretty involved set of decisions, and really want to commend our elders on the job that they are doing to give perspective and thought and reflection as they're making these decisions. Um, and this is in no way an announcement. I don't know at the time of this recording. I don't know what the plan is in terms of us getting back together starting on a Sunday morning. But I do want to reflect a little bit on some of the challenges about that. Um, I believe Governor Stitt put on the front end of these phases churches because, I first of all, he's a religious man. And secondly, there have been grumblings, as we've talked about before, of um, religious persecution, that kind of stuff, which really is not the case. But in the South, we're very sensitive to those kinds of things. So I think he went ahead and put churches on the front end of the opening concepts. And I want us to look at that, step back from that just a little bit, and look at it from the perspective of the opportunity for sharing infection, things like that. Um, some of the first hotbeds of the coronavirus were actually churches. People getting together, and I think there's a unique reason for that. If you look at it this way, if you go to Walmart, you're not going to touch people. We don't normally touch people in our culture. Now you may shake hands, but that's actually relatively rare. That's shaking hands is when we're trying to go to a more higher level of intimacy, if you will. If you pass somebody at Walmart, you don't touch them. You don't reach out and shake their hand. You can go all day at work, so many places without actually touching someone. But in church, it's not the same. We touch a lot. We hug a lot. We pat each other on the shoulder. We are very, very physical. It's not bad. It's just the way we are. And because of that, what it means is in terms of placing us in this continuum of opening up, we're probably one of the last groups. I know one of the last groups that have been targeted for opening are bars. And we're actually more like bars than we are schools or things like that because of the people go to bars for connection. They go to bars for um, socialization and all those kinds of things. And it's the same with church. That's not our primary reason for be there. But a lot of us get our socialization at church. And guys, I want you to understand it's relatively easy to set up seating for keeping social distancing. And I want you to remember that in all of these, as we open things up, the virus hasn't gone anywhere. It's not been cured. There's not an inoculation for it. To a certain extent, we're just getting tired of being quarantined, and that's understandable. But when we go to an assembly, sitting and having, kind of a 12-foot circle around you, 6 feet on all sides, and your family, it's just a logistical issue. The other problem is as we come and go. We all arrive there at relatively the same amount of time. We all leave at the same amount of time. And honestly, I want you to think in terms of having interactions and discussions in our foyer with a 6-foot social distancing circle. We tend to fellowship in groups, if you've noticed. And to be able to do that trying to minimize touching, trying to minimize how close we get to one another, it's going to be a challenge. And those kinds of issues, have to be dealt with. That's part of. And if you've been getting out, you've been noticing the steps that companies are going to try to mitigate distance, to try to mitigate touching. Charlotte and I went to a restaurant that all the outside doors were open because they didn't want anybody to have to touch a door. Very understanding, very understandable, because the times in which we live. But again, if you go to the mall, you don't touch people. If you go to the movie theater, you don't touch people. If you do, it is bumping into them, kind of thing. But when we come to church, and I want to tell you, as one of the people that's up there every week, and there's 10 or less of us there every Sunday, I want to, because it is unconscious, it is difficult not to touch each other. It's just second nature to hug. It's just second nature to offer your hand in a handshake. When we sit in the auditorium, we social distance. But you have to consciously do that because our natural inclination is to cluster. It is to be close to one another. And also what you think about in terms of when we sing, we sing. Now, when we don't just breathe, we push our breath out. Naturally, any breath that we breathe carries with it moisture. You can prove that by breathing on your car window or your mirror at home. And that moisture obviously will carry all kinds of different things. So I'm asking you to a couple of things. One, be patient with the process. But secondly, I want you to start being aware of when we do get back together. We're gonna practice some difference, and be ready for that, because one of the things that I've noticed, and this is troubling a bit to me, is when we started opening up certain businesses, restaurants, it's almost as if people said, "Good, we don't have to wear a mask anymore." From my observation, the wearing of masks and social distancing it's almost like someone yelled, "Ollie, ollie, odds and free." And I think we need to be very aware that, when we do get back together, and they're saying we're a year away from having anything near a cure or inoculation or whatever for this. I do want us to be aware of how much, obviously, we love each other, how much we long to be together, and how we like to show that. And I'm just wanting you to be aware of that, and just as we continue these discussions, keep that in your mind. Fellow that I worked with in Seattle by the name of Roy Vaughn, when we were out somewhere, he'd call his wife, and when he hung up, he would say, "CYK, honey, CYK." And I finally asked him, "What does CYK mean?" He says, "Consider yourself kissed." Guys, we may have to practice CYH, consider yourself hugged, or CYH, consider your hand shaking. Just because I think you, as well as me, we don't want to be any part of sharing anything with anybody that would be problematic to them, and especially something that could have this potential of devastation. So keep those things in mind. Some of you may have heard of Ira North, preacher at the Madison Church of Christ in Nashville, Tennessee, an amazing preacher. He started Amazing Grace Bible class that became kind of a legend in its own way. Wrote an interesting book on evangelism, a great book on evangelism that I read when I was in school. And the title of the book was Balance. Now, I don't think anybody would expect, writing a book about evangelism, that the title would be evangelism, or it would be balance. But that's exactly what he called it. And in his discussion in the book, he was talking about evangelism as being part of everything that the church does. And because it's part of everything that we do, we can get out of line. And he talked about churches who have sold out to evangelism and have lost members, have lost they've sold out to new Christians, and they have not maintained relationships with or focus on those who are already Christians. And it just illustrates the point that in trying to focus, it's important that we maintain balance. And I want to talk a little bit about balance, because the title of this lesson is, In Christ and with You, I can accept that people will misunderstand me. Now, by the term misunderstand, I'm not talking about the way I talk, or that I'll say something that they misunderstand. I'm talking much more fundamental than that. I'm talking that people will not understand who we are and what we're about and what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. Won't understand motives, won't understand purposes. Will think we're crazy. Will think that we're out of our minds because they can't find an explanation for the things that we're doing in the way that we're doing it. Now, to introduce that, I want to introduce the concept of emotional balance or emotional imbalance. There's a term called cognitive dissonance. And when you hold two things to be true in your mind that are contradictory, it creates in you tension. For instance, I'm a good person. I kick my dog. Now, those are dissonant concepts because good people don't kick their dogs, okay? Now, I'm trying to hang on to the idea that I'm a good person, but I'm also trying to hang on to the reality that, well, I'm a good person, but I also kick my dog. See, it's a dissonance. And that dissonance creates tension, which creates a disharmony. Dissonance is two notes that don't go together. And you've heard that in music. You've heard that in when a performer hits a wrong note, it just stands out because there's no bad notes. It's just that one doesn't fit for this key. So the idea of dissonance is it doesn't sound right. It creates tension. It's almost like fingernails on a chalkboard. It's not that it doesn't sound right. It just sounds so wrong. We can hold incompatible beliefs in an unaware situation. This creates emotional tension. In fact, I believe that so many people are under constant emotional tension because they're trying to hold dissonant beliefs together. If it's not addressed, the inner turmoil can bubble up into all kinds of issues. I can be a walking contradiction to where just about everything that I hold to is in conflict with just about everything else that I hold to. Guys, I believe that's exactly what in our political realm, when we talk about truth and we talk about being politically correct, I believe that the core of political correctness is holding two ideas that are in conflict with one another. And it's our conflict that I want us to look at. So I can have a generalized feeling of unease, frustration, anxiety, depression, and I see this in clients a lot. They understand I'm anxious. They understand I have depression or anxiety, but I don't know why. And what that suggests to me is there's a good possibility they're holding to some beliefs that are in conflict, and that's creating tension. I mentioned one example. For instance, here's a good example of cognitive dissonance. I believe that criminals should be punished. I'm a criminal. Now, justification does not remove the conflict. Yeah, I'm a criminal because I had to, or this or that or whatever. Or I believe that criminals should be punished. My child is a criminal that I do not want to see punished. You see, that's a cognitive dissonance. And one of two things that will happen is I'll back off my I think all criminals need to be punished, and I'll make an exception for my child, but I know I'm making that exception. Or I will say, I believe that all criminals should be punished. My child now is a criminal. I don't want my child to be punished, but all criminals need to be punished, so my child needs to be punished. That's one way to cure the cognitive dissonance. Now, creates other kinds of challenges, my concern for my child, etc. Another one, and I think in a lot of Christians, I'm a disciple of Christ. I don't go to church. Or I'm a disciple of Christ. I don't give. And in fact, if the preacher reminds me of that, I'll get mad at the preacher. Because when he points out that dissonance, because if he says, you're a disciple of Christ, it's important that you give on the first day of the week. As long as I hold those in consonance with one another, I'll say, yeah, amen, go for it. But when I have a dissonant belief system in that, and I say, yeah, but I'm a Christian, but I don't give. Well, you should give on the first day of the week. Now I'm going to get mad at you because you pointed out the dissonance. You have made me feel unhappy. You have made me feel bad. Actually, he didn't make you feel bad at all. What he did was pointed out the bad feeling that you carry around constantly, even though subconsciously. Now you take 20, 30, 50, 100 various dissonant belief duels, and you're going to find yourself with a lot of anxiety. And of course, the answer to that is we need to live lives that are consistent and consonant. We are susceptible to this because we have a strong sense of justice and fairness. And a lot of our dissonance comes from the fact that we believe we're being treated unfairly. And we'll say that's not fair. Justice, the idea of justice is fair play for everyone. The difficulty integrating cheating into a worldview is that I don't want to say it's okay for people to cheat, but people cheat. If I say people cheat and I do not think people should cheat, but people cheat, does that create dissonance in me? It shouldn't if I accept it. If I accept the reality of the way people are versus my desire, my standard for people. But this idea of justice gets down to our being misunderstood. Guys, I think probably we carry in us, probably each one of us, a considerable amount of cognitive dissonance having to do with the way that Christians get treated. Now, sometimes that's Christians as a whole, Christianity as a whole. Sometimes that's you and me as individuals. You see, I think fundamentally we desire for everyone to like us. And I think in our desire for people to like us, and that's fair. You see, I try to like everybody, so fair play is they would like me back. And I know, philosophically speaking, I know that there are some who don't like me. There's some who pretend they do. But philosophically, I know that. But the challenge is I've never really accepted that to the point where I expected. And even to the point that Jesus is going to get us to where we anticipate it. I work hard, and I know you do too, to treat other people with respect. I desire everyone to treat me with respect. And fair play would say, if you treat someone with respect, they should treat you. For you to say, I work hard to treat other people with respect. I expect other people to treat me with respect. I know that there are people who disrespect me. You see, that's dissonant. If I say I work hard to treat others with respect, I desire for others to treat me with respect, but I know that there are people who will treat me with disrespect. Now I'm coming to the point of dealing with the dissonance, you see, because it's not my values that are in conflict with one another. I'd like people to see things my way. I know that there are people who disagree with me. That's dissonant. I would like people to see things my way. I know that some people get angry at our disagreement. Okay, that's dissonant. But I don't want it to be that way. All right, that's more dissonance. So let's go back and say that again. I would like people to see things the way I see them. I know they disagree with me, but I don't want them to disagree with me. Now, there's two levels of cognitive dissonance. And I know it sounds funny to say I would like people to see things the way I do. I know that some people will disagree with me. That's okay. I expect a certain amount of disagreement. I expect, as I walk through my life, to upset people. I expect to frustrate some people. It's not that I'm trying to, and I'm not justifying my behavior. I'm just saying that I can be the best person I can be, and I'm still going to do that. Can we get to the point of saying, I am at peace with it being that way? Now, not just peace. Jesus said, rejoice and be exceeding glad. Hang on, we're going to get to that. When he talks about how people don't understand us, how they misunderstand us, how they purposefully misunderstand us, and that gets to be sinister, then Jesus is saying, not only should you expect it, you should rejoice and be glad. I accept that I'm sometimes misunderstood. I want people to empathize with me as I empathize with others. I believe that people should treat each other the same. I know, again, philosophically, that some people will not empathize with me. I know philosophically some people will desire to do me harm. But I rejoice in the situations in which they do. Now, see, it gets strange here because anytime we see someone not empathizing with anybody, we get upset. Now, we get upset in part because we project ourselves into that situation. How can they treat someone that way? Because they do. That's the acceptance we've got to get to. And it's not just, how can this person mistreat this person? How can they treat me this way? Because they do. Because Jesus predicted that they would. And Jesus asks us, as a response to that, to rejoice and be exceeding glad, and he's going to tell us why. The moral directives that you live by and the moral directives that I live by, the motivations you live by, your thought process, your intentions toward your motivations and your intentions toward other people, your love for your country, your love for people outside God's grace. These are all folks that are going to, at times, respond negatively to you. They're going to avoid you or ridicule you or persecute you or maybe even take you to the point of death. Because they don't understand your moral directives. They don't understand your motivations. They don't understand your thought process. They don't understand your intentions toward them. And we're seeing that all over in our culture. People misunderstanding how Christians respond to things. And there's some people purposefully misunderstanding why Christians respond to things the way they do. And that's when it gets sinister. But understand, it's exactly what happened with Jesus. Matthew chapter 5, verse 10. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men can insult you, persecute you, say all kinds of evil against you falsely on account of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Okay, so what Jesus is telling us is, you're blessed. Now, you've heard some people say, I don't know how true it is, but some people have said the word blessed can be interpreted happy. I think often that's the case because a lot of blessings do bring us happiness, but some blessings we don't understand to be blessings, and therefore they don't always make us happy. Now, they should, I guess. Blessed are those who've been persecuted for the sake of righteousness. Now, we're not talking about being persecuted because of your bad attitude or your bad personality. or you got up on the wrong side of the floor this morning. We're talking about doing the right things. We're talking about being the right people for the sake of righteousness. And he said, blessed are those, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. In verse 12, he's going to say, great is your reward in heaven. The road to the kingdom, the road to heaven, is marked with persecution. To the point that he said, you're blessed if it happens to you. No, you're blessed when it happens to you. Blessed are you when men cast insults at you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely on account of me. Rejoice and be exceeding glad for several reasons. One, it happened to me. Secondly, great is your reward in heaven. But what I want us to talk about is the expectation of it. I think philosophically we understand that. What I mean philosophically, it's real, but it's not real. I could see it happen. I don't see it happen. I could see a situation where it might be present. I don't normally see situations where it might be present. So it's kind of a philosophical truism that's not a real reality, if you will. But Jesus speaks of it much more straightforwardly than that. To the extent that he almost says, anticipate it, look for it. Now, don't go searching for it, but watch for it. And when it happens, rejoice and be glad. Now, if you're watching for it, it means that you're expecting it. If you're not expecting it, it'll catch you by surprise. If you're not expecting it, somebody will say something at work that just fillets your heart. And your day's ruined, or your relationship with them is ruined because you expected something differently from them. Why? Well, they should treat me this way or that way. According to whom? Well, everybody knows, everybody doesn't know. They shouldn't be rude. Why not? You see, we carry some presuppositions that are dissonant with reality. They're dissonant with what we run into every day, and it causes us turmoil, anxiety. Rather than, I wondered when that was going to come, and here it is, which is coming from a place of peace. 1 John chapter 2, John makes an interesting statement about the only way we can know whether some people are our people is if they hang around. Children, it's the last hour, and just as you've heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have risen. From this we know that it is the last hour. They went out from us, but they were really not part of us. For if they had been part of us, they would have remained with us. But they went out in order that it might be shown that they are all not of us. There's dissonance there. The idea that someone would leave the church or leave us, someone would be critical of us or whatever, it seems to continually catch us by surprise. John is saying they've got to leave to prove they were never here in the first place. They've got to leave to prove that your assumptions about them were not necessarily true. The only way you can know whether they're a part of us is if they're still here. And that's a tough one. But guys, if that's the expectation within the church, or let's say if that's the expectation with spies in the church, if you would, spiritual spies, what does that say about the world? It says that we're carrying around a lot of dissonance of people are going to like me. What's not to like about me? Everybody should like me. And then I get really upset when somebody doesn't, or when they mistreat me or misunderstand. That's why I'm using the word misunderstand. They don't understand my motivations, and I couldn't explain it to them in 100 years because they have not had the transformation of mind to understand God's ways. Matthew chapter 5, verse 10, again, blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness. Blessed are you. Verse 12, rejoice and be glad. You're not going to rejoice and be glad when you're taken by surprise, when you're shocked, when you're let down, when you're disenfranchised. But you're not disenfranchised by reality. You're disenfranchised by your illusions about reality. So how do we get to the joy when people misunderstand, when I'm going to be made fun of, when I'm going to be, everything that I stand for is going to be criticized and lambasted and all of that? This is not just about being tolerant. This is not merely just acquiescing to reality. This is understanding a blessing. As we've said, some have interpreted blessed as happy. So if you want to use that interpretation, Jesus is saying, if you get persecuted or maligned or anything having to do with righteousness, you should be happy. Your reaction should be happiness. But we don't seek that. It's hard for us to do this. Have you ever noticed that true martyrs, I don't know if you've ever read Fox's Book of Martyrs, true martyrs, look at Stephen when he was stoned, had a peace about him. And the peace that he had was, this is a pre-written script. I know this story. I know how this story is going to end. I've read the story. I know what happens to prophets. And here he is, another prophet. And he's looking up into heaven glorified by what he sees. Glorified because of the reward he's just about to receive. And he's washed with peace because he's not expecting anything different. He's not expecting they would do anything different. So finding consonance is, I'm going to be misunderstood. I expect to be misunderstood. So the question is going to be, how many times today will I be misunderstood, misinterpreted, misrepresented, which, as I said, gets sinister? How many times is that going to happen today? If I anticipate 10 and it's 15, my anticipation was not high enough. If I anticipate 10 times and it's 5, hey, I had a good day. I was only persecuted 5 times. You see, it's all about expectations, and it's all about that consonance or dissonance of our thinking. Everybody's going to like me. I'm going to go to work and I'm going to put everybody in a good mood. Well, good luck with that, because it's their moods, not yours. When it comes for the sake of righteousness, I will know I'm being blessed. I will remind myself until I feel blessed. Did you hear that? When I'm persecuted for the sake of righteousness, when I'm dissed, when I'm put down, when I'm made fun of, anyone killed, the whole gambit, I will remind myself, Steve, you're being blessed. You knew this was going to come. Here it is. I will keep reminding myself until I feel blessed. That's that joy of knowing. By the transformation of my mind, I will be happy when this happens to me and know that things are as they should be. Brothers and sisters, we've really got to confront the reality that we can coexist in a wicked and perverse generation and there not be dissonance. We've got a problem. I know we all want to get along, but that shouldn't even be a goal. A goal of getting along is different than a goal of promoting our mission and our gospel. Do we want to hurt people? Absolutely not. That's not part of what we do. But I also want you to understand that we have got to understand what our mission here is. And that our mission, if you look at, and in your study guide, we're listing all of these folks. Jesus, did it apply for him? Did he get persecuted? Yes. Did everybody like him? No. Were there people who wanted to kill him? Yes. And there's some statements in that lesson that are kind of challenging to say. Statements like, I know that there are people who want to kill me. I know that there are people who want to destroy me. I know that there are people who will never like me. And see, if those statements, and there's more of them in the lesson, and I hope you'll take a look at them. If If that shocks us, then that demonstrates this dissonance we already have. It demonstrates not only do I believe that everybody's going to like me, I'll protect that. I'll do whatever I can to try to ensure that people like me. I will compromise myself without realizing it sometimes in order to settle this dissonance I have. I want everybody to like me. Well, this person doesn't like me. Well, I'm going to do what it takes to get this person to like me. You see, that's a wrong way to deal with dissonance. Now, remember, I hadn't done anything wrong. Again, this is in the matter of righteousness for the kingdom. This person doesn't like me. That's the way it needs to be. Well, should they? Well, that's between them and God. Do I still have a mission with them? Absolutely. Do I still have a ministry to them? Yes. And quite possibly, if I pursue that ministry, their frustration with me is going to get even greater. We've got to change our mindset, because I think so many of us have been taught this expanded view of justice, that everybody should be treated fairly, everybody should take care of one another, and all of those kinds of things. And it just raises the question, why? Why should somebody take care of me? And what you're going to find, those ideas that you have are going to come down to because God wants it. God wants me to take care of my neighbor. God wants me to treat people with respect and honor and all of those kinds of things. Because there's a lot of people who don't honor God. So why in the world should they? It's naive to believe that people are going to act in a way that's inconsistent with their value systems. And if they don't value God, they're not going to value the things of God. But we do, and we will. And it will cost us sometimes quite dearly. Because we may find our circle of friends narrowing because we're not really willing to compromise integrity. We're not willing to compromise honesty and all of those kinds of things. We're in good company. Did that apply to the apostles? Yes. Did it apply to Moses? Yes. Did it on down the line? They lost reputation. They lost respect. They lost honor, even among their closest people, because those people were not honorable. It wasn't because of what they did. So we've got to get to a place where we can say, I expect it. And then when it happens, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to rejoice and be glad, because this is telling me I'm doing the right thing. Well, that's a tough one for the week, isn't it? Because that's what we've all got to live. We're living wrong ideas sometimes that creates cognitive dissonance that gives us fear and anxiety and frustration and sometimes depression. We need to bring all of those dissonant ideas into alignment with one another, understanding that the cost of that might be relationships, and it might be some relationships that are important to us. God bless you in your mission. God bless you in your walk. Nobody said it's going to be easy, but it's blessed. And its eternity is awesome. Have a great week. Love you.